I get questions, why did you talk to this politician? He's an autocrat. You can't talk to him or to her. But, I will always defend talking to everybody. The easiest part is not to talk to anybody. More difficult sometimes is to stay in a dialogue and have the guts to explain why this is important.
Welcome to the DIACOMET podcast. In this episode, we sat down with Marta Kos, European Commissioner for Enlargement since 2024 and a former journalist and diplomat. Thank you, Commissioner, for joining us on our podcast.
It is a pleasure to discuss this interesting topic, the meaning of dialogue and public communication. I can't imagine my work without this.
I can imagine. You have worked as a journalist, diplomat, and now as a European Commissioner for Enlargement. How would you say have these different roles shaped your understanding of dialogue and public communication?
It's interesting to be on both sides. So as a journalist and as a politician, I have seen both sides of the communication and also the limitations. Sometimes, even today, I say that I would like to go back to the journalism because actually the journalists, in my opinion, have more freedom. There are some certain limitations which I have to consider as a politician. But, as a journalist, of course, you ask questions, you ask for clarity, and you can very quickly notice if somebody is avoiding the answer or is using kind of complicated words or trying to control the message instead of explaining it. Now I'm on the other side and I know actually why this is happening. And now I understand why communication sometimes it's difficult. Even if I have to admit that I don't consider myself as a typical politician because I simply can't use this bureaucratic language. Probably is this the result of the past experiences, not just working as a journalist, but also as a communication expert teaching the others. And, I know that as a politician, sometimes I have to explain or tell the unpopular decisions and that sometimes you can't say everything. And sometimes there is no perfect sentence that can make a hard truth easy. But what I see more and more is that honesty really matters. People are not afraid of the complex issues. People are tired of unclear answers and they want to know what is happening, why it matters, and what are we doing about specific subject. And as a Commissioner for Enlargement, I think that this is really especially important. Enlargement is complicated and actually complex topic, but we can't explain it in a bureaucratic way. We have to be able to explain what does it mean for people and for their future and for Europe as a whole. And I, want from my team all the time, not just to explain how and what are we doing, but the bigger picture. So why are we doing something? And if we do this, then also the journalists on the other side are much better understanding why we are doing something.
So you mentioned honesty. Could you mention some other elements that you think are important to communicate responsibly in today's society and digital landscape?
Indeed, you can only build the trust when your approach is really based on honesty, I was saying before, but also not hiding behind technical language or empty words. And, less is more is my motto in the sense of if you answer, then shut up. Don't tell more or explain what you haven't been asked. But I would also think that if you hide behind the bureaucratic language, people will feel it. It is also, being sincere. And I know that, we shouldn't tell this answer, I don't know, but I tell if I don't know, I can't know everything. And if you say it, if the base is okay, if the journalists are trusting you, EU, then they will understand that you can't have all, let's say, all the numbers. So I think that sometimes we in the EU are also guilty of using this kind of language, which is too complex, too institutional, and also too far from people's daily lives. And sometimes this language hides the fact that we are not saying enough. But I think that, the difference between when I was a journalist and today is that we have more ways than ever to reach people directly. There was no social media. When I was correspondent in Germany at the beginning of the 19th, we didn't have emails yet. We didn't have mobile phones, but it was working somehow. So today we can use all the technical means to reach the people directly. And we need to use this, but really, to connect to people to understand us. And of course, what I also am seeing, if I want to tell, let's say 10% of the content, I have to know 100%. And this is, also my team knows I have to know much more that I'm saying. Then I can really, pick up what is the most important. So it is not about sounding clever. It is really about being understood.
Can I ask something here? How much frankness can you afford as a commissioner? I mean, you mentioned that you don't want to use, let's say, very diplomatic or at least very bureaucratic language. On the other side, I guess people in policy and diplomacy are used to specific kind of language. And is that sometimes, can it be a problem if you are, or were you at any incident too frank?
This is a very good question because, sometimes if you are in the middle of the negotiations, you can't tell everything. And being a former journalist, I always have difficulties with this because I would like to tell more, but I know that I can't. And then there is another specific in my work, being responsible for enlargement, for the technical part, the part of the political dimension, it is in the hands of the member states. And they can have different interests, they can have different opinion on something. So it is not that the member states are following what I, as a representative of the Commission, is saying. I have had problems with this. I would say that because, I always try, even if I can't say everything, I try to get, I would say, buy-in from the other side why I can't say everything.
As you may know, our project is dealing a lot with dialogue, with the meaning of dialogue. And we want to ask you if, from your experience as a commissioner, is dialogue always possible and necessary or maybe effective?
I'm happy you asked me this because, for instance, especially with one candidate country, I have the feeling that whatever I say, it is wrong for somebody. And I'm always telling, I'm not there to please people. I'm there to deliver the results and, in my case, to prepare the country to become a member of the EU. So I think that what you are doing is excellent, really, because dialogue is one of democracy's greatest strengths. I get questions, why did you talk to this politician? He's an autocrat. You can't talk to him or to her. But, I will always defend talking to everybody. The easiest part is not to talk to anybody. More difficult sometimes is to stay in a dialogue and have the guts to explain why this is important. And, dialogue really helps people who disagree to remain part of the same society. Everybody can't have the same opinion. And this is, I have lived or grew up in the times. It was more in this direction. But today, having different opinions, it is actually what is normal. We just have to have a way to discuss. I will never forget, I have been for the first time visiting Montenegro, and I had a speech in their parliament, and opposition parties, some of them were boycotting this session. I didn't feel well, but then I was also explaining why I don't feel well. It is not about, me being praised there, but it is about if there is a place where different opinions should meet, and if there is a place for dialogue, it is the parliament. And even, when dialogues can't solve everything, it can lower tensions, it can reduce mistrust. So the dialogue is not always simple, but, living in Switzerland for some years, they really have this great concept of concordance, where they try to find the compromise, even if it's qualitative lower than it would be the best possible solution. But with this, going perhaps a bit lower, they include more and more people. And they told me, once they are the most afraid of the referendum result, which is 51 against 49, because they know that actually 49% of the people who didn't agree with some solution will have to live with this solution.
I'd like to ask here, because earlier you mentioned that you didn't have emails and mobile phones, for example, early 90s or late 80s. But today, do you think that all these digital communication and all these options, including social media, are helping our societies in the dialogue, or are they actually causing bigger problems than benefits?
It goes in both ways, in my opinion. So reaching many people, it is much easier today than in the old times. On the other hand, what I really don't like is first that everybody can be a journalist if we speak about the profession, and that everybody is somehow exploiting the freedom of speech in the sense I can say everything. The freedom of speech doesn't mean that you are allowed to say everything. It is still, we should stick to the truth. So I think that social media, if used properly, can really help reaching many, many people. And this is actually the basis of democracy. We can't have a functioning democracy if we don't reach the people. And today, from the technical point of view, it is more easier than in the past. But from the content, I think it is more difficult.
This is related also to the issue of disinformation, which we wanted to ask you about. It's a major challenge in Europe and also in candidate countries. Do you have any views? How should democratic institutions respond to this challenge?
I think that disinformation is a serious threat because it attacks trust we were speaking about before, and it makes people doubting the institutions, the elections, the media, and even each other. So this is the negative side of this technical development. And I'm very happy that in November last year, at the level of the European Commission, we have adopted the first strategy how to protect our democracies. We call it a democracy shield. If you would have asked me 15 years back if we should do something like this, I would find you probably a bit strange in the sense of really, we don't need any special strategy to protect our democracy. But this is what we need today. And this strategy is built on 3 pillars. The first is how to make our societies, democracies more resilient. The second pillar is how to make the media more resilient. And the third part is how to support civil society organizations, which are an indispensable part of how do we protect our democracy. And I'm very happy that with this democracy shield, we are including also our candidate countries to be a part of this. So it is a task of the European Commission and of all the member states to do measures to protect our democracy and to protect the freedom of speech, the freedom of media, and encouraging trustworthy communication. And it is not easy because, freedom of expression, in my opinion, doesn't mean leaving citizens alone in this flood of lies and manipulation. And what we are supporting also financially from the European Commission is faster fact-checking, stronger independent media, better media literacy, and also more honest communication from institutions themselves. And this is our response to this. But of course, it is a daily work. We have been engaged in Moldova last year. We are now engaging in Armenia before the parliamentary elections. And we just got a request from Montenegro. This is interesting to see, what is happening in Montenegro. One day after we announced that we have built a working group which will prepare the accession treaty, the number of hybrid attacks went up really high. Of course, what we do here is one part is cybersecurity, but the other part is actually about the narratives. And, for me, coming from communication, what I have learned the most in Moldova and now is helping me that, modern, we say now that debunking is not enough. If we want to go your way, you have to do the pre-bunking. So you have to spread your narratives. And what we see now in the enlargement process are 3 narratives which are repeating in different countries also. The first narrative is if you go the European way, you will have a war or a conflict on your territory. The second second one is if you accept the European financial help, you will be economically independent. And the third one, which I like fighting a lot, is you will lose your identity. Coming from a small country like Slovenia, I can name so many examples how Slovenians being a part of the European Union is helping protect our identity. And if I would now go back to the journalist times where we started this conversation, probably I would go into this, how to fight the narratives or manipulation or disinformation, because, I notice now why our adversaries are doing this. They don't just want to harm our candidate countries. We, European Union, we are the main target, and we learned a lot from the past. I love to say, when UK decided to go out of the European Union, we said that in the campaign, we decided, the European Union, that we will not say a word, because anything could be interference. We didn't even dare to say, please, we love you, Brits, stay with us. No, we thought that it is the interference. So we learned from these times, and I'm happy that we are using all the knowledge we have now to help our candidates.
If I can add here, I think that among the popular narratives, so to say, from the, let's say, disinformation side, is very often also the narrative that all the media are not trustworthy because they're all biased and part of some conspiracy. And also very often NGOs are also a cause of different problems or part of some conspiracy. And not just in the candidates, but also in some countries within the EU.
I'm happy you said this, Dr. Milosavljević, because I think that what, for instance, we have noticed the autocrats first are going after is free and independent media and civil society organizations, or gender equality further on. But, these are the means, and we have seen, we have a very good examples inside the European Union. What happened, for instance, in Hungary. When I was studying journalism in the 80s, we have learned actually that the journalists or the media are the fourth power in the society. Today, I think that independent media are the fourth power. And of course, also the civil society organizations. They are the watchdog. And, nobody from the autocrats likes those watchdogs because they are really looking carefully what they are doing. So that's why, one of the things which has changed also a lot is that we are giving more and more support for free and independent media. No democracy can work without free and independent media. We need information which will be the basis for our, let's say, decisions when it comes to the elections. That's why, having free and fair elections, it starts with free and independent media.
You mentioned debunking in the context of disinformation. Would you say EU institutions are doing enough or are being effective in this?
We are in the process of changing ourselves. I think that we see nowadays that it is not enough to wait that you will be asked a question or that something bad is happening and then we react. And I'm using this, that we have to have more action when I speak about the MAGA ideologists. We know that they are investing millions and millions of US dollars to be active in Europe with the main goal, or their narrative, is based on three basic issues. The first is that our civilization is in a decline, that our economy is in decline, and that our democracy in a decline. But, this is simply lying. If you see the charge of the institutions who are dealing with democracy development, you can clearly see that the United States of America is in a decline. Yes, there are some European countries, and if you look at the chart, Hungary in the latest years was really, really going now. I hope this is now stopped. What I would wish to see is, not being as a Commission or European Union just in the action when we have to answer to something. But, if I would now be a dreamer, and my dream would be that we would start a special campaign on why we can be proud of our Europe. There are so many things we can really be proud of, but sometimes, we don't talk about it, or we are too humble to praise ourselves. But I think there are many, many things. And one of the achievements of freedom is really, freedom of expression, which shouldn't be misused, or that we still can have researchers doing their work on the field of gender equality or doing their research on the field of climate changes. So I think that, yes, we should do more pre-banking why Europe is good and attractive.
So I think it could be a sort of a building a bridge to the United States, as we believe. It was a sort of one of the homelands of the free media and of democracy, building a sort of new campaign from Europe using the famous, of course, quote from Martin Luther King, "I have a dream." Europe could say, "We have a dream," and then build on the questions that you mentioned, sort of symbolically building a bridge to the US, as we believe would be democratic and sharing the values with the European Union.
I agree with you completely. And, I'm very proud to be European. But, first I am Korošica. I'm from Carinthia in Slovenia. I'm Slovene, but also European. And going up in the communist regime and now living in the European Union, I can say the difference being outside or being inside. And I also notice this when I talk to the candidate countries. They want to come in because they know, what is so important to us. But it will not come just like this. Perhaps we were too much relying in the past on the fact that democracy will persist anyhow. It's interesting to see that when we speak with the candidate countries today, building a resilient democracy is one of the most important pillars in the accession process. But I remember when Slovenia was on the way to become a member of the EU, we didn't speak about we have to develop strong on the field of liberal democracy. It was somehow natural or normal. Today it is not anymore. But from these years of deconstruction of our democracies, it is like this in the history. After deconstruction, construction is coming. And perhaps today, with all the technical equipment, with all the knowledge we have today, with all the advancement, especially on the field of the communication sciences, we can do really, really a lot. But it will not happen just like this.
In the context of constructing something better, more democratic society, what kind of message would you share with citizens, journalists, policymakers, educators, very broadly, with people who want to contribute to this construction, to rebuilding trust and dialogue in public life?
Oh, you have said already many buzzwords, what we could do today, but thank you to you educators to doing this, teaching young people how to think critically. It's what we need today. We need policymakers who speak with honesty, and we need citizens who will listen, question, and who will actually be engaged because they want the best for themselves and for their country. And I have said before, this is not easy today. We should really study a lot, and I know that you are doing this, why the right populists are so much better in the communication than the others. Anger, fear, manipulation are spreading much faster than the truth. And the lies are much cheaper than the truth. To make a really very good TV show or TV piece for, of 5 minutes, it can take up to 2 weeks and a lot of money that you can do this. And we should also be able to take away the fear of the people. I'm many times confronted with the sense of, but the people are saying this, so the people are not right. No, people, we are having different opinion. And if their opinion is wrong, then we should try to tell them the truth. But, you were speaking also about rebuilding the trust. I don't think that the trust can be rebuilt with the same tools that damaged it. We should be aware of this. So we have to choose the harder path because I think it is the only way it will work.
And sometimes it's difficult to rebuild something, at least from some sort of value perspective. And simply in the sense, once it's damaged, it can be really a problem, like a Humpty Dumpty, as they say it in English. Once you've broken something, it's difficult to put it back. Let me use the example from one of the candidate countries, Mostar in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and its famous bridge collapsed during the war. Then they promised that they will build a new one and more shiny one and even a better one. But of course, you can make a reconstruction of that. We can make a replica of that, but it can never have the spirit of an actual old bridge from 500 or 700 years ago. So sometimes rebuilding is quite difficult after you make some terrible mistakes. And I think that's also something where you come into the role.
Indeed. And what gives me hope and optimism is also that sometimes one person can be enough to go a different way and in both directions. But sometimes, mostly we speak, one person is enough to ruin something. On the other hand, sometimes one person going in the right direction can give hope. And, I have experience going to Ukraine many times. And once I had a meeting with the civil society and they told me, you're not just our commissioner for enlargement, you are our commissioner of hope. I was really deeply touched. I have never seen my role in this, even if we are demanding so much from Ukrainians while they are fighting the war, they see a hope living in Europe with us. And I think that we have to learn a lot. I agree on the communication field, on the field of the dialogue, but this is the only way. This is the only way, I can't imagine. And it hurts sometimes, when we don't speak with somebody because it has a different opinion or is part of a different ideology than myself. This will not bring us further. So it is being responsible and acting responsible what we need today.
Thank you so much.